What up, Ho Biscuits? It's your girl Skitten, back at it again. Leave my armrest alone.
Hi.
My husband's here.
Fuzzy hair, don't care.
Say, my husband's hair is here as well. It's basically another person.
Basically. How you guys doing over here in Skitten, Slovakia?
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I have a toucan cup full of some coffee.
You're looking pretty good over there.
Thank you. You're looking pretty nice with your braids. Another hair change I don't know if people can take anymore.
We'll see how long these last because my head feels like it's gonna fall off.
Yeah.
So we are here to watch an OSP video about Shakespeare.
I really love reading Shakespeare plays for the first time.
Well, this thankfully actually has nothing to do with his plays and everything to do with who he is
Thank God.
in history, like how he relates to history.
Ooh, man, I was really worried. I was like, let me tell you how much I don't want to sit some more boring ass Shakespeare. The first time's great.
Right. So, fun facts, right, are that because I was homeschooled in high school and it was, you know, faith-based or whatever, I maybe read 2 passages of Macbeth of Shakespeare in high school.
Yeah,
So,
it was an experience, right?
I enjoyed it, actually.
Right.
And then I went to college and didn't really learn anything about Shakespeare for my first, like, 2 years of college, which is wild as an English major.
Because colleges realize how grossly unimportant Shakespeare actually is.
So, my favorite Shakespeare play is probably Othello.
Right. Oedipus Rex.
I did not enjoy Oedipus at all.
Great story.
No, it's
And
not.
the ending, fabulous.
Awful. So, but we're here to watch how he relates to like history specifically.
All right, I love some history stuff to be taught, so teach me. Now, this instant, I'm putting down my scepter.
Are you ready?
Yeah, man.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women
Oh, it's
merely
blue.
players. They
Yeah.
have their exits and their entrances,
He got engaged.
and one man in his time plays many parts. Nothing else quite sums up William Shakespeare's attitudes on the power of theater, but England's favorite bard demonstrates time and time again that the reverse is also true, that one stage can become anywhere in the world. You've surely spent a class or two with one of William's works, and heck, Red
Julius Caesar,
started
I forgot.
OSP as a
Venice is
Shakespeare
good.
channel,
Oh,
but
forgot
today
was
we'll
good.
put aside the tragedies and comedies we've handled here before, and instead focus on his relationship to history. So, to see how he became a legendary
back, Julius
playwright and to
Caesar's
find out why he's England's #1 accidental historian, let's do some history. William Shakespeare was born in the English town of Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564, early into the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Though Shakespeare's family wasn't noble-born or all that rich, they lived far enough from London that they could pay their rent without going on a monthly heist. Shakespeare
Cool.
spent some of his early life in Stratford helping in his dad's glove shop, so our young Bill would have been familiar with his local tradespeople. At the age of 18, Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway and had a daughter 6 months later, and I will let you run the math on that one. Aside from family matters, Shakespeare studied at the town's local grammar school. It wasn't fancy, but it was an honest education, and as we'll see, it gave him everything he needed to succeed in his later career as a playwright. His primary instruction was in Greek and Latin, with the aim
Because, you know, back then, you had to know more than one language to be successful.
I mean, in Europe, they still do that. They still teach multiple languages in schools.
Yeah.
They didn't play, though. Like, even though those little shit schools they used to have and, like, poor-ass bro people.
Yeah.
They used to, like, fucking drill them kids, bro. And then they would grow up to do pointless things like growing corn.
But they knew fucking Greek and Latin, bitch.
Raking the fields. Like, what the fuck did I go to school for?
If only that same thing was applied here
I mean,
in the US.
Yeah.
If only people had to learn multiple languages here too. Like actually learn
Everybody
them.
speaks Spanish. Bonjour. El baño. Esta el gato.
Domo origato.
That was a good joke. I mixed a couple different languages there.
Itadakimasu.
That was racist. I thought you were squinting because of the joke, but I realized you're squinting because of the lights.
Why are you like this?
I thought you were like that. That's why I brought it up.
My buns are heavy with despair.
I'm sorry. I didn't know.
And also hair, because they're heavy.
aim of reading the New Testament and the ancient Roman classics in their original language. On its face, this is a fairly simple curriculum, but it was radically new to Elizabethan England, as the Renaissance love for all things ancient was just making its way north. In the 1500s, a lot of things were new to England. In addition to the concept of disposable income, English theater culture was just taking shape, and it was the textbook definition of quick and dirty. With only a few permanent playhouses, most stages were simple pop-up wooden sets with no decoration and only a few key props. And unlike the ancient Greeks and Romans, England didn't have a handy catalog of material to draw from, so plays were written quickly, often in collaboration, and then performed and discarded. This meant that freelancers were in high demand, and this is probably where Shakespeare got his start in the theater biz, writing with London's other leading playwrights. Actors, by contrast, mostly went in...
What?
Yo, that's fucked up.
You ain't never seen them sculptures of William Shakespeare's face?
And I'm wanting to talk because my forehead look big as hell right now with these braids. But
his
like,
shit was long. It wasn't just like big, it was like tall. Every sculpture of him got this fucking gigantic head, dog.
I'm dead.
Ugly ass dude.
You're not my dad.
Ugly ass.
Troops working together over multiple productions over the course of years with the financial support of some hotshot patron who got the naming rights. In 1594, Shakespeare was a founding member of the Lord Chamberlain's Men under the patronage of none other than the Lord Chamberlain. And this is where William worked as both an actor and as a playwright for the rest of his career, writing tragic and comic fiction as well as historical plays for almost 2 decades. Sweet mother of job security. In 1598, the city's main playhouse was closed over a landlord dispute, so our troupe took matters into their own hands by disassembling it and hucking the timber across the Thames in the dead of winter to build a new theater on the other side of London. Now that is dedication to the craft. The next year, the Globe became the home of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, but despite its size, it was still pretty simple. Flat stage, no roof or fancy sets, standing area below, and 3 balconies above. The Globe didn't faff around. And with room for the lower-class groundlings as well as the high-rolling aristocrats, everybody had a place, so Londoners of all stripes could enjoy the plays. To that end, Shakespeare wrote to the highbrow and to the low, so if your local Shakespeare production skips over the dirty jokes, then you have been duped, because that is not the authentic Shakespeareans. Before too long, Shakespeare and friends performed at the royal court for Queen Elizabeth herself, and when the crown passed to King James in 1603, he was so fond of the troupe that he became their patron and redubbed them the King's Men.
The King's Men,
classy. And speaking of kings, let's zoom out for a minute to look at how England was doing in Shakespeare's day, because it was quite a busy time. Before James Stuart became king, Elizabeth was the last reigning monarch of the Tudor dynasty. The Tudors are best known for ending the War of the Roses, telling the Pope to scram, and converting the Spanish Armada into a subaquatic lumberyard. In Shakespeare's day, life was pretty good. England was peaceful, finally, and the arts had never been more popular. Ancient Greek and Roman texts were getting translated into English for popular consumption, and Raphael Holinshed had just finished up a mammoth historical chronicle of England, Scotland, and Ireland. With English patriotism flying higher than ever, people wanted to hear stories about English greatness. Now, most Englishmen knew how to read, sure, but Holinshed's history was about 1,000 pages too doorstoppy to be accessible to the average lad. So this is where Shakespeare comes in. He lures you with the promise of entertainment, keeps things exciting with pathos and murder, then dazzles you with some snark and lowbrow jokes, and when you leave, you realize that he duped you into learning. This might sound familiar because this is how we teach you stuff. Disregarding the fact that he was extremely good at writing plays, Shakespeare's mere choice of subject matter gave countless Englishmen their first glimpse at their own history. In making popular the genre of the history play, Shakespeare inadvertently became the most influential historian in England. Shakespeare's early work is loaded with histories, and his first focus was on the war.
It's like how Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote Hamilton, except like people actually think Hamilton is factual, and that makes me sad.
I'm gonna pretend like you didn't say the last part, and I'm gonna focus on the fact that he's teaching people things that you should have been able to read. But since your parents didn't read it, right? They didn't know they had to tell you to read it. So then you should watch it instead. That's smart.
Do you know how many people argue?
Don't. Like, come on, don't ruin such a good thing. No, they don't. They understand what a play is. So they don't watch a movie and be like, Washington doesn't really have rockets on the roof of it. Like, come on.
It's just so upsetting. It's just so upsetting how many people just take Hamilton as fact. Because then other people who are like super dedicated to making sure that you can enjoy Hamilton because Alexander Hamilton was a bad person in real life.
Yeah, he was terrible.
Yeah. They're just like, you can't enjoy this. And I'm like, You're not gonna take this from me just because those people are stupid.
Can we just have a place where we like things that are just make us feel like we're better than we really are? I watch Hamilton, I'm like, this is a great joke, man, great twist on history. And I know he was a bad dude in real life, but that's a great man, I can relate to that. That makes me feel like I'm better than him in some regard.
Like, people are like, oh, Aaron Burr was a sympathetic character. Aaron Burr was a dick. And actually did not like Alexander Hamilton at all. Was not sorry that he murdered that man.
I mean, you know, because he wrote it down. You could just read it. Just read their writing. It's great. Anyways, we'll continue this. But yeah, that's the same way that we're learning stuff now, though.
Yeah.
It's through stuff like Hamilton.
Yeah.
Through things like, the only thing with Shakespeare is it's dated.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard to remake it with that same historical flair, I think. Because now storytelling is so divided. Like when you make movies, when we talk about inspired by now by Hollywood, it's so far away from learning anything. You can't
Exactly.
you can't trust any of the facts in it.
Yeah.
And at least with Shakespeare, like it was very supposed to like parallel what happened pretty closely.
You know what it also just reminded me of?
What's that?
The fact that I didn't know for the longest time that Anastasia actually fucking died.
Oh, like in real life.
I thought she lived because of that movie. I thought she was alive. I know that bitch died.
Wow.
She got shot like a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Her and her whole family.
Damn. The whole
The whole thing. Yeah, everybody.
Okay.
I didn't know that for the longest time, and then I read this book and I went downstairs to my dad in tears.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know.
They was all dead.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
It was fucked.
Hey, that's kind of
Anyway.
funny. Yeah. Moving on. That's funny.
It was not. I was very traumatized.
I know, but thinking about you being traumatized is hilarious.
You're
in
awful.
that context. You're right.
War of the Roses, where he covered the life of Henry VI in 3 plays and concluded with the bloody reign of Richard III. Afterwards, he jumped back in time to show the rise of the hero King Henry V. This was a 4-play sequence starting with Richard II through Henry IV and finishing with Henry V. Now, all of these plays are self-contained, but they share characters, conflicts, and some key themes. Plus, when we put the 8 plays together into a macro story, this Henriad becomes a century-long epic of English history's greatest hits, culminating in the ascension of Henry VII and the new Tudor dynasty. So, with our proverbial stage set, let's summarize some Shakespeare. Quickly and quietly before Red catches me trespassing on her turf. We begin in the late 1300s with Richard II, who's been asked to settle a dispute between 2 nobles over some misplaced cash and a murdered uncle. Richard dawdles and avoids doing his job, so Henry Bolingbroke takes the opportunity to coup his way into becoming King Henry IV. Now, Henry had wanted to absolve his usurpation guilt by going on a crusade, but there's turmoil at home with the nobles, so it's too risky to leave. Worse yet, his son Hal is too busy partying in the tavern to be a helpful prince, but he eventually decides to do his job and fights the rebels. Now, Hal might be a decent prince, but being a good king is a much harder ask. Unfortunately, this takes the entire runtime of the play and an earful from his dying father, but by the end he's shaped up, apologized for his misdeeds, and is ready to take on the world as King Henry V. Now, this is the spicy play. Our Prince Hal is all nice and kinged, and England is done civil warring, so he lays a renewed claim to the throne of France. In return, the French prince sends him a very rude letter and some tennis balls as a concession, so Henry, quite toasty by the slight,
I was just asking.
I know, but I couldn't keep a straight face after you said, oh.
I was just confirming I suspected.
I know, but it just is one of those things where it like sinks in that you haven't had a public education.
Yeah.
Stuff like this happens. Super funny to me.
My education was America.
Right, yeah. No, I feel you, yes.
God.
Yes.
Israel.
This is the same thing. That's the movies based off of people's understanding of the plays.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Boring, so he lays a renewed claim to the throne of France. In return, the French prince sends him a very rude letter and some tennis balls as a concession, so Henry, quite toasty by the slight, sets off to go a-conquering and starts the 100 Years' War back up. He first takes the port of Harfleur with a hearty once more onto the breach and pushes on to Agincourt, heavily outnumbered. The night before the battle, he treks around the camp to ruminate on how being king is effort. Ugh. And the next day, the English army surprised the French and themselves by longbow spamming their way to victory. Cut to several years later, and Henry is negotiating a treaty with France as well as wifing up Princess Catherine of Valois. The end. Except for the part immediately after this, where Henry VI whiffs it and loses the war, but that's where the second 4-parter comes in.
Wow.
So, time skip forward 2 years, and Henry V unexpectedly bites it, so little BB Henry VI is now the king. From here, everything goes south. France starts throwing hands lands at Orleans with the help of one Joan of Arc, while English nobles are too busy scheming against each other to stop it. A rift opens up between the Lancaster family and the Yorks, which becomes a big mess later. Several time skips later, Joan is captured and killed by England, and Henry marries Margaret of Anjou. Despite some initial success, England lost the war and got the boot out of France, so Richard of York is rather miffed with Henry's leadership and lays a claim to the throne. This all comes to a head at the Battle of St. Albans, where York smashes the king's forces and sends Henry...
Why is this nigga dying like this?
No, wait.
No, stop.
Please.
No, don't.
Stop.
He looking right at the sword. Don't you put that shit out. I'll whoop your ass if you stab me. Sorry. He just... That's a pathetic way to die.
This all comes to a head at the Battle of St. Albans, where York smashes the king's forces and sends Henry into disarray. With defeat in sight, Henry marks York as next in line for the throne, but Henry's wife Margaret and the Lancastrian faction think that this is stupid, so they take the fight to the Yorkies. They win for a little bit, lose for a little bit, win a little more, but then they start losing again, and eventually Henry is captured and killed in prison by Richard Jr. of York. Once again, the last play in the set is the spiciest one. Edward IV of House York is king, again, long story, and his brother, Richard Jr., wants the headgear for himself because it's civil war all the way down. So Richard jails his younger brother and drowns him in a vat of wine, which makes Edward die of shock, giving the crown to his two kids, with Richard as their regent. Clearly his work isn't done, so he convinces the nobles that the princes are illegitimate so that Richard can get the crown from his dead brother. But then to seal the deal, he had the kids...
He killed the kids too? God damn it.
Technically...
What the fuck?
Technically, the kids disappear. And no one knows technically what happened to the baby.
He drowned that nigga in wine, then he died, then he killed his brother's kids.
He technically...
What the fuck?
Technically, the kids just disappeared.
Damn, that was a lot of death just back to... That was like a fucking...
Yeah, it was a very bloody...
That was a quad feed.
Yeah, it was a very... It was a very bloody section of English history. Literally, like, you know how they're like brother fighting against brother, uncle fighting against, like, it was, that's literally what it was.
That was pretty hard,
Killed anyway because loose ends sink royal claims. Richard takes the throne, but rebellions break out immediately afterwards, and the Earl of Richmond leads an army against the king. Before their battle, Richard is haunted by the ghosts of all the people he's killed. He gives the kingdom for a horse speech. Richmond kills him and takes the throne as Henry VII. England's troubles are over. The Tudors have arrived. Now, in a stage performance, there's not much room to investigate the big-scale dynamics of national conflict like you'd see in a typical history book, but Shakespeare does focus in on the nuances of kingship and how their character affects the way they rule a state. That said, these plays can get flack for retroactive Tudor bias, especially in the case of Richard III. Historically, Richard was unremarkable, but he was guilty of being the last king before the Tudors, so clearly he just has to be awful. As such, Shakespeare condemns him to a murder-frenzied reputation and shows rumors like the killing of the young princes as a fact. The play explicitly sets up Richard as a pure evil villain to contrast with the heroic arrival of Shakespeare's present Tudor dynasty. So while Richard III makes for great drama, it pulls double duty as political propaganda. And this isn't the last time that Shakespeare fiddles with facts to make a narrative more exciting, as McBoy and wife are fully rewritten to be more murderous, and Cleopatra is... Alright, listen up, Bill. But outside those glaring exceptions...
Bill, little bitch. Holla at you real quick. Blue was like, let me thug out on this nigga real quick. G-check Shakespeare.
Shakespeare tells his history pretty straight, and the benefit of a multi-person drama is that diverse perspectives can be portrayed, especially with stories like Julius Caesar, where competing rhetoric weighs the morality of tyrannicide and civil war. Shakespeare is at his best when characters and ideas are in conflict on stage, and that's just as true for his histories as it is for his dramas. Ignoring for a second how Shakespeare has made life tricky for later historians, let's appreciate the effect that he had on his contemporary audience. When history is distilled from its 1,000-page write-ups and presented in a way that people can actually appreciate, suddenly an entire share of the population can understand their national history for probably the first time ever. This kind of storytelling was powerful then, and it's powerful now. I mean, just...
Kind of like how VeggieTales made the Bible more accessible.
Yeah.
Shakespeare is VeggieTales.
Okay. Yes.
I know some English teachers out there.
VeggieTales is Shakespeare. Stand by it. That's a quote. That's what you can't choose your legacy. You just chose your legacy. English major thinks VeggieTales that's what you're in for. Just accept it. Don't shy away from it. Yeah, I said it. What's up?
Oh my god. Also, look how fat they drew Henry VIII, bro.
Beefy, bro.
Yo, don't get me wrong. Henry VIII got extraordinarily grossly fat in later in life, but goddamn, nigga.
Just think about how much better you know revolutionary American history since Hamilton came out. Though Shakespeare didn't intend to publish his plays because his script is lifeless without its actors, his friends and the King's Men compiled a folio of his works for distribution, which is why we're able to enjoy the brilliance of his plays even today. And that's actually where some get hung up on his story, because surely our talented William couldn't really have been some countryside plebeian. Only a gentleman of refinement could have possibly written these masterpieces.
Of course.
So there have been theories that Shakespeare was just a pen name for Edward de Vere or Sir Francis Bacon or some secret guild of writers, but alas, Shakespeare was indeed a kid from Stratford who got a decent grammar school education and really enjoyed reading the classics. Perhaps the greatest Shakespeare conspiracy of all, dare I say a Shakespearacy, was that William could be smart without being rich. Thank you.
Hey.
Wild. What a concept.
You know, as far as the difficulties go with setting history straight, one of the biggest things that Shakespeare, I know for a fact, didn't want to affect was the truth about history. His plan wasn't ever to compete with how historians tell history.
Right.
But because of writers like him that so skillfully captivated audiences, and historians' tendency to already tell history from their standpoint anyways, it got worse after the Shakespeare era.
I mean, how do you tell someone, you know, that this dramatized, romanticized version of history isn't what actually happened?
A majority of the most famous and popular historians who people will go to write things were basically just storytellers. They weren't actually interested in being historians.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so now today, you know, when we focus on those kind of things in public school, they make sure to at least address those things, but they don't go into enough depth telling you the truth because it's not approved to tell people about how much death and stuff is a part of, you know, real life.
Right.
So I think today is just really, our generation is really open to it, so it's cool. But like my mom's generation, they're not even, it doesn't even occur to them that it's the truth. They don't know how to accept that truth, I think. Some older people do. I think they have a hard time understanding. They don't know how things work because they weren't told.
That makes sense.
You know?
Yeah. Well, God, I look so fucking pale. I need less light in here. God damn.
Can you just turn the light down on the camera so you can stop having that same commentary and focus on Shakespeare, please?
NT Husin, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any fun Shakespeare factoids, make sure you share them down in the comments below. Also, don't forget, if you guys have any reaction requests or recommendation, that you put those down in the comments below. Just a reminder, guys, I am taking a break from SCP content, so you can leave your recommendations down there, but it's going to take me quite some time to get to them. Anything that you would like to add?
I just gave a whole breakdown of my feelings of the impact of Shakespeare on history. You're saying you want more?
So no.
Bitch, you better make me something for dinner if I keep talking about this shit. Hungry, nigga.
NT Husins, peace out, Hope Biscuits. It's getting lit.